Hi everybody, welcome back to Adventures in Polish Land. Today I'm excited to share with you my top 5 reads of 2024. I read 43 books this year. It is currently December 29th as I'm filming this, and so there were 5 books that I gave a 5-star rating. I don't think I'll be finishing any more books by the end of the year, and if I do, it's highly unlikely they'll be 5 stars, so I feel ready to share this list. I thought I would start off by sharing with you the few 4.5-star books that I read this year. I'm just going to read through the list very quickly. These are books that I absolutely loved, but there was one or two few little things about them that prevented me from giving it a full 5-star rating. In order for me to rate a book 5 stars, there has to be nothing about it that I disliked or that I would change. So you can see why I don't rate many books 5 stars. The 4.5-star books that I read, though, were Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers by Samuel Burr, A Field Guide to Lies by Daniel J. Levitin, Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart, Different Seasons by Stephen King, and The City and Its Uncertain Walls by Haruki Murakami. Now let's jump into my 5-star reads. I'll talk about them in chronological order, and I actually started out the year with a 5-star read, so that was awesome. My first read of the year was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I've had this on my list for many years. I remember when it was released and a lot of people on BookTube were reading it, and I actually found this copy at a library book sale, and for some reason it took me a very long time to read it. This is a historical fiction book. It takes place during World War II. We follow 2 main characters. The first is a young blind girl from France. She and her father go to live with her uncle to have a safer location during the German invasion into their country. And our other protagonist is a young German boy. He is very good with radios, and this earns him a spot in the German army. And so throughout the novel, we hear from both characters, and the years of the war go on, and we learn what they're dealing with. And over time, their stories slightly overlap, which makes this a beautiful and poignant story. This book, although it is quite large, this is actually the longest book I read this year. The writing is very approachable. Sometimes I can get nervous with books like this one. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner, so I'm worried the writing might be a bit dense, but it was easy to read. The plot moved itself forward very well, and the writing is just so immaculately tied together that I really enjoyed the reading experience. I thought about this one several times throughout the year, and I feel like I learned a lot and I experienced a different World War II story than we often get. So if you're someone like me who hasn't read this book yet, I highly recommend it. So next up, we have my one reread of the year, and that is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. I like to reread books, and for some reason I only reread this one, and I'm going to be implementing some changes for next year to make sure that doesn't happen again. Patricia Lockwood is one of my favorite authors. I read her memoir Pre-Study when it came out through the Book of the Month Club, and I absolutely love that book. So when I found out that she had a fiction novel out, I immediately read it from the library, and then this year I bought myself a used copy. This is actually the UK edition that I found at the Strand in New York City, and I immediately reread it. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It is so well written. We follow an unnamed narrator. She is a young woman. She works in the social media space, primarily on Twitter, which in this book she calls the portal. She uses code words like this to make this book last through many years. So even if Twitter or similar platforms no longer exist, this book will still be relevant. In the first half of the novel, our protagonist is in the portal, and you see how the writing is very disjointed. One thing goes to another very quickly. She's stuck in this mysterious world that is very hard for her to break out of. But then something happens in the protagonist's personal life, and it's a family emergency, and she gets out of the portal, and the latter half of the book is in her personal life. What makes this book so touching for me is that This is an auto-fictional novel, which means that it is a fictional story, but it's based on the author's real life. And so because I had read her memoir, this really packs a punch for me because I feel like in a limited way, I know who her family members are, and to read such a tragic story that they all had to face in real life is just heartbreaking. This book is amazingly written because Patricia is able to write in two completely different styles, but both make sense for the book. This is a short novel, but it really packs a punch. It deals with real life issues that we are facing in this country today and will be facing even more in the next 20 or so days, if you catch my drift. So I highly recommend this. I know some people, it isn't their style, but for me, this is one of my favorite books of all time, and I think everyone should give it a try. Next up, we have something that I did not expect to read ever again, nor did I expect it to be on my top list for the year. It's a John Green YA book. I don't read a ton of YA anymore, and I've only read one John Green book in the past. That was The Fault in Our Stars. I have read his novella holiday collection, Let It Snow, and I do enjoy that one, but The Fault in Our Stars, I found the writing to be quite pretentious. I found it wasn't very authentic for a teenage voice, and I just thought John Green's not for me. But I actually heard John Green talk about this book on his Instagram because the movie was coming out, and he was also in a video with Karen Puzzles, who is a YouTuber that I really like watching. And when he talked about his book Turtles All the Way Down, I knew that I needed to read it. Like I said, this is YA. It's about a young teenager. She has OCD, and John Green himself has OCD, so I knew this would be a really accurate portrayal of that disorder, and it really feels real. In fact, I have not been diagnosed with OCD, but the characters' daily life felt so real to me that I was in a bad headspace after reading this for a little while because it just leached into my life, and I could totally empathize with so many things that our protagonist experiences. One of the reasons I really love this book is it incorporates one of the tropes that I really enjoy, which is a treasure hunt or scavenger hunt element. One of the characters in this book is a teenage boy who lives across the pond from our main character. They knew each other as kids from summer camp, and he is from an uber rich family, and one day his dad goes missing. And so one aspect of this book is trying to find out what happened to the dad, where he went, why he disappeared, etc. So not only did I like the treasure hunt element of finding the dad and solving the mystery, but I thought this was a really touching story about what a teenager who has OCD faces on a daily basis, because as we know, being a teenager is really difficult on its own, but when you have these added symptoms that affect so many aspects of your life, it can be an even bigger challenge. So I gave this book 5 stars. I read it in 2 days, and I honestly couldn't believe it, but I highly recommend it. Next up, we have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. I heard about this from Emily Fox, and I am so glad I read this. This is another short novel. It is about a young woman who has lived in a cage with several other women for almost her entire life. She has never known any men, as the title suggests, with the exception of the security guards that monitor her cage every moment of every day. So she lives in this cage with these women. They don't know how they got there. They don't know where they are. They don't know why they're there. All they know is that they're provided with food on a daily basis and very basic necessities, but that's all they know. One day, while the guards are providing them with their food and the door of their cage is open, an alarm goes off and the guards drop everything and run. And as it turns out, these women get very lucky because their cage door was open and they were able to escape into the world beyond. And the story really picks up from there. This is a really interesting novel because it's a survival story where you really don't have any answers. And I think you have to be okay with the discomfort of not knowing everything when you read this book, because you're following our protagonist who, although she learns a little bit about where she is as the book goes on, in the end, all you have is a woman who was brought up in captivity, essentially, and she decided to keep going and build a community with her fellow women, even though she was a very solitary person in a lot of ways. I think this book really speaks to human nature and the ability to keep going even if you essentially have nothing to live for. So I found this a very powerful book. I will certainly read it again, and I look forward to buying my own copy at some point. And the last book that I rated 5 stars this year is When Haru Was Here by Dustin, Thao. This is another YA book. I don't read a ton of YA anymore, but when I do, it's often very heartbreaking and poignant and powerful, and that's what this book is. I talked about this in a recent reading update, but we follow a teenage boy, and at the beginning of the book, his sister, with whom he's very close, she moves away to college, and at the same time, he is also discovering his sexuality and becoming closer with one of his male friends. One day, they are in Japan for a school trip, and our protagonist meets this mysterious man named Haru, and they spend an incredible day together, and they lose contact, and he doesn't think he'll ever see him again until one day the story flashes forward and he reappears. This book is an exploration of grief and what we as humans will do to persevere in times of extreme grief. As you can imagine, this book is very sad. I'm being vague so as to not spoil the book, but what I'll say is I read it essentially all in one day with the exception of 20 pages, and by the end I was sobbing because it's just a heartbreakingly beautiful story. I think if you're looking for something that's going to rip your heart to pieces, but also provide comfort in knowing that all of us are going to have to deal with these unfortunate circumstances, some more than others, this is the perfect book for you. And I look forward to reading Dustin's other books, even though he has advertised that all of his stories are sad ones. So those are my top 5 books of 2024. Let me know if you have read any of these and your thoughts on them in the comments. And also let me know what your favorite books of the year were, because I would love to know. I hope you're all having a great end to your 2024, and I will see you in my next video. I'm going to film it right now, which is going to be my reading goals for 2025. Bye.